Ashley Benefield, a former model and ballerina, finding herself at the center of a high-profile trial after being accused of shooting and killing her husband, Douglas Benefield. Claiming self-defense, Ashley's case sheds light on the complexities of domestic violence and the legal challenges that arise when trying to prove justifiable force. All this weekend on the Hidden Killers podcast, we're examining the case of Ashley Benefield, examining the events leading up to that fateful day in their Lakewood Ranch, Florida home, and the allegations of abuse Ashley made against Douglas. We're taking you to the courtroom for raw audio from the Stand Your Ground hearing of Ashley Benefield all weekend here on the Hidden Killers podcast.
So in my affidavit for the warrant, if one of the rounds entered the outside of the right leg and exited the inside of the right leg. That was based on what I was observing.
And as you sit here today, is that still your position that the entry wound was on the outside of the right knee and the exit wound was on the inside as opposed to it being reversed?
Based on my training experience, what I observed, sure. But like I said, I would always defer to the doctor. I would never argue with a medical expert.
So I would assume then you would defer to the doctor as well as it relates to the proposed wound to the arm.
Absolutely.
All right. So you got wrong, one, whether or not Mr. Benefield was facing Ashley Benefield when he was shot. Correct?
Sustained and
all right. Your conclusion was inaccurate.
Objection. Sustained.
All right. Moving on. You told us that you observed Miss Benefield that night, and you did not see any signs of domestic violence, struggle, or things of that nature, such as torn clothing.
That's accurate.
Okay. And is that, in your experience, always the case with domestic disputes?
No, not always.
All right. And you're aware that the shirt that you observed on Miss Benefield that night, where it came from?
I'm sorry, which shirt are you referring to?
You said that you did not observe any torn clothing on Miss Benefield that night.
I did not.
Like her shirt was not torn, her shirt wasn't torn.
I didn't see anything, no.
Okay. Where did the shirt that you remarked that you didn't see torn come from? Do you know?
I have no idea where she purchased the shirt or where she got it, sir.
Okay. Isn't it a fact, Detective? Now, you're the lead detective, correct?
Sure.
That shirt was brought to her by another deputy while she was sitting in a squad car, was it not? That would be Deputy
I wasn't at the
Paul.
scene, sir.
But wouldn't that be something you'd be expected?
I don't know if it is or not. Let him finish the question.
Wouldn't that be something, as the lead detective, you would be expected to know before you make the statement that you didn't observe any torn clothing, which is inconsistent with domestic violence?
No, and I think if you actually play it back, I already testified to the fact that she was wearing a sports bra.
All right. I want to ask you a couple of questions about the home. You drafted a search warrant for the house, correct?
That's accurate.
All right. And you drafted that search warrant pretty much immediately based on your experience of knowing that you wanted to get into the house to conduct the investigation.
I drafted that search warrant based on the other detectives on scene advising there was probable cause to assume that a potential homicide occurred inside. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I'm glad you referred it that way, because isn't it a fact that that warrant that you were drafting less than 75 minutes after the shooting, isn't it a fact that you didn't describe it as a homicide, you described it as a murder? Did you not?
I'd have to look at the warrant again, but that's
I'll
possible,
be happy
sure.
to show it to you.
Relevant to the
Yeah.
understand the difference between
So what's What's the relevance?
I think the relevance is to show that this detective had already reached a conclusion that this was a crime rather than a homicide, despite his testimony that he wanted to do a fair and objective investigation over the course of an extended period of time, and that he was referring to it and calling it a murder within approximately 75 minutes following the incident.
All right.
He'd already made his mind up.
Detective Warren, can you step out in the hallway? It's easier if you step. We can send you out.
That's
It's
not a
easier
problem,
than
sir.
having them approach.
Not a problem, sir.
The rules have been invoked. Don't discuss your testimony. Don't let anybody talk to you about your testimony.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. So I don't think I have the search warrant, unless it was one of the attachments. I don't recall seeing it.
I'll give the court a copy.
Well, let me ask you this. So the point you're making is that instead of using the word homicide as the crime that's being investigated, the detective used murder.
Yes, and
So what statute would you have proposed that he should have used? Because as we know, a search warrant, what's the point of a search warrant? That a crime's occurred, or is occurring, or has occurred, and that there's probable cause or a reasonable probability that the fruits of that crime or the evidence of that crime is going to be found within the place to be searched.
yes,
So a search warrant will list a crime or crimes that have alleged to have been committed. So what I'm saying is, what is your argument that he should have put as opposed to murder with 78204?
Yes, sir.
yeah.
As opposed to 78204?
My argument is that every single member of the Manatee County Sheriff's Office but him described this as a homicide, including the medical examiner, rather than a murder. But that's not enough. This detective, in his deposition to me, believe it or not, under oath, said and represented that every homicide is a murder, and anybody who shoots and kills somebody is a murderer. That is his perception of murder. As opposed to an objective evaluation, what I am tying in is that within 75 minutes after this incident occurred, this detective had already decided that my client had committed murder. That's what I want to bring out.
All right. I appreciate all that. I'm happy to receive that. I'm going to respectfully, as you said today several times, suggest that there is a much more direct route to get where you want to go. There's no jury here, so, impeach, but,
Okay.
okay, so I think you can get there. I think we can be a little bit more direct about it.
Yes. I understand.
Yeah.
I'll go right to it.
I think, you want to say, hey, you said murder in your
Right.
search warrant. Yes, I did.
Yep.
That was within 75 minutes of being called out. Yes, it was. And then you can make all those arguments you want to make about how that was biased and his mind was made up and it was predisposed, how this was going to go. And I'll receive all of that.
Understood.
Okay. There was one other issue you were asking about.
Judge, before we move on from that, just so I can understand from defense counsel, is because I'm looking at the actual search warrant and the only time it refers to murder is where it says the statute number. Mm-hmm. Is that the only instance in which he's referring, or is there some other? I couldn't find another one. I just want to make sure before we continue that we understand.
I assume that's the issue.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you. I just want to make sure.
All right.
think we can bring him in.
Yes, he's on his way. All right, Detective Warren, take your seat back.
Yes, sir.
Did anybody discuss your testimony with you, approach you, try and talk with you?
No, sir.
All right. So I have sustained the state's last objection. Mr. Taylor.
So, Detective, you described the incident that you were investigating within 75 minutes of it happening as a murder.
In the search warrant?
Yes.
Sure.
All right.
I think all of our search warrants actually are for the same thing when we're investigating murders.
You did the same thing for 2 other search warrants.
Yes, sir. That's what our unit investigates are murders.
Now, did you tell me under oath that every homicide is a murder?
I believe I might have misspoke when I said that, but so basically the intentional killing, unlawful and intentional killing of a human being is a murder, yes.
Did you tell me, just to make sure that it wasn't a mistake, did you not tell me that anyone who kills is a murderer?
Well, there's differences in whether it being justified or not.
Is the answer to my question yes?
Objection, is this impeachment? And is
I'm going to sustain.
Thank you.
Again, I think when we're impeaching with a prior inconsistent statement, we don't lead with the out-of-court statement that might be inconsistent. I would need to hear the testimony here today, what the answer is, and then I can determine if the prior statement is inconsistent. So I'll sustain.
Do you remember me asking you at the deposition the following question? On page 11, line 20, you could have a homicide that's...
Objection and proper impeachment.
I'm going to sustain. I need the answer. I need an answer here in open court, and then we
Okay.
can discuss whether that's a prior inconsistent statement.
Are all homicides murders?
The unlawful killing of a human being is a murder, yes, sir. There are some cases where it may be justified.
It may also be excusable.
Sure.
Is everybody then who kills a murderer?
And that's a matter of opinion, I guess. But I mean, by the definition, a murder is the unlawful killing of a human being.
Is it your statement that anyone who kills is a murderer?
Objection, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Would you be surprised to learn that you were the only one?
Objection.
Let the question finish, please. Go ahead, sir.
In the Manatee County Sheriff's Office throughout this case who designated it as a murder as opposed to a homicide?
Don't answer. Sustained.
Another interview that you did was of Dr. Quintal. Was it not?
I did an interview with Dr. Quintal, yes.
And you conducted that interview pursuant to a waiver that was given to you by Ashley Benefield so that Dr. Quintal could share with you the health information that he derived from interviewing Ashley Benefield, correct?
Yes, sir. We were trying to gain an idea of what their relationship was like.
Did you learn during your interview with Dr. Quintal that Ashley Benefield was afraid of Douglas Benefield?
He may have made some statements indicating that she made some, or he had some feeling about that.
Did you learn that she was scared of violence from him?
I don't, like I said, he said a lot of things. He also said he didn't understand why Douglas was with her.
Did you learn that Dr. Quintal told you that Douglas Benefield was a controller?
Objection, this is I think,
Sustained.
twice hearsay.
Not offered for the truth, Your Honor, offered for what this witness learned and knew during the course of his investigation.
And that's
Well, what does that have to do with, I'm not understanding what the relevance of that is, that a doctor told this witness that the defendant said the victim was
Not the
controlling.
defendant, Your Honor, that Douglas Benefield, the victim,
Right.
was a controller.
Right, but the doctor would have heard that from the defendant?
Yes,
All
but
right.
it's also the doctor's opinion. He was giving this detective his opinion of Douglas Benefield, and he was describing Douglas Benefield to this detective. And there's a reason why I'm asking. I'm going to follow up with a question.
It sounds like you're offering that for the truth.
No, sir. I think you'll see why I want to show that this witness was aware of this.
Okay, I don't know, but we're going to see.
I will tie it up for the
Okay.
court very quickly. Do you recall Dr. Quintel telling you that he believed that Douglas Benefield was a fake who used God as a pretense?
I remember the topic of God did come up. I don't remember, like I said, every word that he said verbatim, which is why it would have been tape recorded.
And you have that recording, do you not?
You should have it as well, yes, sir.
Yeah. And do you recall Dr. Quintel telling you that Douglas Benefield...
Yeah, listen, I'm really, sir, not understanding. I mean, what is the point of all of this?
Next question. If Douglas Benefield had a violent background, is that something that you would want to know?
Sure.
Is that something that would be significant for purposes of your investigation?
One of the things that we looked at was he violent with her? That's why we went through all of the reports. We wanted to know the background because, as I stated earlier, we wanted to do a thorough and accurate investigation before anybody was charged with a crime.
Would you tell His Honor, Judge White, whether you ever did a background investigation to determine whether or not Douglas Benefield was violent?
We did searches based on what was available through the Manatee County Records database, and I believe we also got some information from Charleston or somewhere up, one of those places up there where there were some allegations, but that was it.
Do you remember me asking you this question at your deposition?
Well, I don't know if it is yet, but it might be inconsistent with the statement that was just made about the investigation that was done, but I don't know.
I asked the question. Do you remember being asked the following question on page 84, line 16? When you investigate a case like this, you told me that you don't recall whether or not you did a background on Douglas Benefield himself. Your answer was, I don't recall doing it myself. No.
You're talking about a background, meaning the criminal history. I don't recall doing a criminal history on Douglas Benefield to see if he was a convicted felon, but a background check, it's actually listed, I believe, in some of these other reports where we looked up Manatee County computer records databases and pulled those reports.
So is it your position, Detective Warren, that only convicted felons can have violent backgrounds?
I've overruled.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question?
Is that what you're telling us?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes.
Thank you.
The question was, are you telling us that only convicted felons can have violent backgrounds?
No, but there is a difference between doing a computer record check through our personal database and doing a criminal history check through NCIC, FCIC.
So let me ask you the question again. Perhaps you didn't understand it.
Perhaps.
Did you ever do...
Sustained.
Did you ever do a background investigation to determine what you've told us you would want to know, whether or not Douglas Benefield was prone to violence?
Like I told you, sir, we did searches to find out what information was available. You can change the definition of background check all you want to. Yes, we did our due diligence.
Have you read, by the way, have you had an opportunity to read or discuss the stand your ground motion we filed with the prosecution?
I did, but it was months back, I'm sure.
There's a representation that Douglas Benefield grabbed Mrs. Benefield by the left hand to prevent her from leaving. Do you recall that?
No, not off the top of my head, sir.
All right. You, as part of your duties and responsibilities as the lead detective on the case, you requested swabs, did you not, of various parts of Miss Benefield?
We did.
All right, and that would include her left hand, would it not?
It would have included the areas that we were explained by her attorneys to pay the most attention to.
Did it include her left hand, detective?
You would have to probably direct that towards the crime scene tech that collected the swabs.
Well, how about if I use your report?
Okay.
Objection, Judge.
Yeah, if he's just relating what someone else said or did,
No,
I'm going to sustain.
I'm asking if he requested that swabs be taken of her left hand.
Okay,
That was the
that
question.
question can be asked.
That was the question. Did you request swabs be taken of Miss Benefield's left hand?
I requested the swabs be taken of her arms, legs, hands, and neck.
Okay. As part of your duties and responsibilities as a lead detective, did you ever get the laboratory results of those swabs from FDLE, Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Was it FDLE or DNA Labs International?
Actually, I believe it was DNA Labs International. I stand corrected.
Okay.
Did you get the results back?
Yes.
Did you learn that out of all the people in the world...
Objection to asking this witness about the results of the DNA.
Again, you can ask your question, and then we'll have the objection. Again, I make this ruling because there's no jury here.
I know.
So if I sustain it, I sustain it.
But he's testifying by asking the question.
Well, did you learn that of all the people in the world, only 2 people could not be ruled out for having left DNA on Miss Benefield's left hand? John Sant, the neighbor, and Douglas Benefield.
I'm sorry.
No, do you have an objection?
Yes, that calls for hearsay and
Sustained.
misrepresentation of the report.
I haven't seen the report, but it's hearsay, absolutely.
All right, Detective, I have a few questions now I'd like to ask you about some areas that we discussed previously under oath. I had asked you at the deposition various things about Douglas Benefield. For example,
Objection is this impeachment.
I don't know.
I gotta say the question.
Yeah, so a deposition is an out-of-court statement, which is the first phase of hearsay. I don't know why it's going to be offered, but I don't know if you're refreshing our recollection, which is done a different way. I don't know if you're impeaching. If you're impeaching with a prior inconsistent statement, all I can say is, again, I need a statement here in open court, and then we can figure out if that prior statement was inconsistent.
Yeah. Here comes the statement. Detective, do you have an opinion? How would you describe Mr. Benefield admitting that he shot a gun in the house, in the kitchen, to intimidate Miss Benefield to stop speaking?
Objection.
Sustained.
How would you characterize such?
Objection.
Hold on, I didn't hear the rest of it.
Yeah, I'm just asking him how he would characterize such an act of shooting a gun in the kitchen to intimidate someone from speaking any further.
You want this witness's opinion about how he would characterize, without any frame of reference, I mean, what do you mean
Okay. Detective, were you aware that there was an allegation that Douglas Benefield had shot a gun in the kitchen ceiling of their home to stop Mrs. Benefield from speaking any further?
I was aware, or I had heard that there was an incident allegedly that a firearm was discharged in the residence into the ceiling.
And would you describe that as a violent act?
I guess it all depends on the purpose and how it occurred.
Such as?
Objection as to his opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to sustain on and we're getting into a collateral matter, how this witness would characterize an act that he didn't investigate, he wasn't there for, he's heard about through some unknown source. So, no, what his opinion of that, I'm going to find is irrelevant.
All right. Were you aware during the course of your investigation, Detective, that there was an allegation that Mr. Benefield would punch holes in the drywall of their home?
I believe that I had heard something like that, but I don't recall where that was from.
Were you aware that there was an allegation that Mr. Benefield had beaten his first wife up on their honeymoon?
Objection, Judge, what is it? It is irrelevant what this detective may or may not have known about his past.
Well, actually, Judge, this detective has testified that whether Mr. Benefield had a violent background is something he would want to know, that it would be significant to his investigation.
Right. You know, I'm not taking any of this for the truth of the matter asserted.
Right. I understand.
It just, all you're asking is, did you hear this? It doesn't prove that those things happened.
I understand that.
So I'm
Okay.
not sure why we're asking them is the problem.
And that would be the second question is, so what's the relevance of whether he heard that the decedent may have been violent towards, would you say a first wife? I don't even know who that is. I don't know when they were married, how long
Yes.
they were married. I don't know the
First
nature of their
wife,
relationship. So I'm going to sustain as to relevance.
Okay. You are aware, are you not, of an incident where Mr. Benefield was seen by a neighbor at night standing in her yard?
Sorry. Yeah, actually, we discussed that during the deposition.
Yeah.
I remember because
Yes,
I had
sir.
some questions about it myself.
Yeah. There's a police report that accompanied it. Have you
Yeah.
reviewed it?
I did at one time, and I believe that the witness said that there was a person standing there. And I asked you how we got him identified, because I guess they identified him by his voice, is what you told me.
Yeah.
Which I found odd, because why would you sneak around and then talk? Kind of, you know.
Did you review that witness's deposition?
I did not.
It's Exhibit 5 to our stand your ground.
I don't have access to those, so.
Have you ever placed a tracker on anybody's car?
Irrelevant.
I'll overrule.
Have you ever placed a tracker on anybody's car without the appropriate legal authority?
No, but I've done it with the proper legal authority several times.
I want to lastly ask you about some photographs of Miss Benefield. There were 2 sets of photographs taken, you testified to, correct?
Yes, sir.
Some were on the evening of the incident, and then there was a set that were taken a few days later.
Yes, sir, that's accurate.
So to cut to the quick, if we can, and not test what has up to this point been the judge's considerable patience, the scratches that were preserved in those photographs on Miss Benefield on the night of the incident, you saw them, did you not?
In the photographs later, yes.
Yeah, and they show as red and fresh, do they not?
They appear to be red, yes. I
Okay.
can't tell you how fresh they are. I'm not a wound expert.
Okay, well, they weren't scabbed.
Like I said, I didn't. I saw a photograph later on.
Let me show you the photos.
Sure.
Let me just show them to you, because I don't think that picks it up.
Thank you, sir.
I've passed you 4 photographs that have been previously considered. Do they depict scratches on Miss Benefield on the evening of this incident?
They appear to.
Okay, and do the scratches appear fresh?
I don't think necessarily the one up under the sports bra appears to be.
What color are they? Are they pink?
Like I said, I'm not a color palette expert, but I would go with sure. It could be pink or red.
Okay, are any of them scabbed?
It's kind of hard to tell because they're so minute.
Do you see any scab?
No, and I don't actually even see an open wound on this one that would scab over. So
Okay, let me show you the photographs that were taken a few days later.
okay. Thank you, sir.
Why are these not marked?
We're going to have to mark.
Yeah, if you're going to use photos, you either need to mark the ones you're using or use the ones that have already been admitted.
Okay,
Because we need to have a record of what you're showing the witness.
all right, let me have them marked.
And Madam Clerk, I'm fine if it's just defense 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You don't have to use letters or anything. Okay. All right, we're going to call these defense 1 through 6.
Very good, Your Honor. All right, for the record, Detective, I previously showed you defense exhibits 1 through 4, correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct. There you go.
Now I'm going
Could I just see them? I'm sorry.
to show you defendant's exhibits 5 and 6.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you if those are the photographs that were taken several days later.
You would have to talk to the crime scene tech about that for proper identification, but I believe so. Yes,
All right.
sir.
And is the color of those scratches different than the color of the scratches in the photographs that were 1 through 4?
Well, the scratch that was on her hip, the red scratch that I said didn't have a scab, that's not even photographed in any of these, just so you know. It's actually gone. Other than that small little minute thing you can barely see,
Yeah.
there does appear to be some scabbing, but it's very, like I said, very tiny.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept of blading?
I am.
And tell us, educate us a little bit about what blading is in the sense of it being a defensive posture.
Are we talking about it in regards to law enforcement?
No,
Okay, well, I'm just, so you know, I'm not a jujitsu expert or anything, so.
I understand. I'm talking about with respect to minimizing the area of your body that is exposed to potential gunfire.
Okay, I guess if you were trying to minimize the area exposed, you would possibly turn your smallest side to it. Which would be your side? Sure.
Okay, otherwise known as blading.
If that's what you want to call it. Blading typically isn't a complete turn. It's more of a 45-degree angle or so.
Okay, again, to minimize the exposure.
Well, blading or interview stands, those types of things, blading is typically done like for our purposes. If I'm out interviewing a suspect, I'm going to blade my body and turn my gun sight away from them because honestly, that's more of a threat if they're looking at my gun while they're thinking about fighting me. I want to keep that away from them. It also provides for balance.
Right. You want to make sure that they can't get the drop on you.
It's more of a safety thing than a offensive thing, at least in my opinion. But
Yeah, to protect
like I said,
you.
I'm not an expert, so.
To protect you. As part of your investigation, you determined that the firearm that was used to shoot Mr. Benefield was owned by Ashley Benefield.
One of our detectives, I'm sure, did would have done that part of it. I don't recall doing that part myself.
All right, but you do recall it was lawfully owned by her.
As far as I'm aware, yes.
Yeah, and that she had a concealed weapons permit.
She may have. I don't remember if she did at that point, but it's possible.
I don't believe I have anything further, Your Honor. Thank you for your patience.
State, redirect?
No.
All right, can this witness be excused?
Yes.
Defense, can the witness be excused? Mr. Taylor, can the witness be excused?
Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Detective Warren, you're excused.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, can you reach me those papers?
Yes, sir. There's a couple paper clips here. Do you want those too? Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Taylor, I think these are yours papers. And your paper clips. Yes, sir. All right. State?
The next witness is going to be a little lengthy. Do you think we could take a 5-minute break before we start?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Oh, I can't see that. It is 4:06. How about 4:15? Maybe a few minutes after 4:15.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank
All
you.
right, we'll see you then.
There is more to come in the Ashley Benefield Stand Your Ground hearing. We're bringing it to you all weekend long here on the Hidden Killers podcast. Press subscribe so you don't miss a minute of courtroom coverage. I'm Tony Bruschi. Stay with us.